There's a moment in history people rarely talk about, yet it changed the way soldiers survived the cold. It wasn't a glamorous invention, it wasn't high-tech. It didn't come with medals or triumph. It was quiet, almost invisible. But it kept men alive when even thick wool blankets couldn't. And once you hear what it was, you'll wonder how something so simple slipped right out of modern memory. The story takes us deep into the cold theatres of World War II, where frostbite could take a soldier out faster than a bullet. Supply chains broke. Winter gear couldn't always reach the front. Troops were stuck improvising with whatever they could find. And in those desperate conditions, one forgotten material became the unsung hero of insulation. Most people today don't even know its name. Yet armies depended on it when temperatures dropped low enough to freeze metal solid. Let's jump straight into what made this material such a quiet powerhouse and why it beat blankets at their own job. Before the war, kapok was mostly used to stuff pillows and cushions. It came from the fluff of the kapok tree, a natural fibre that looked delicate but had some wild properties. It repelled water, trapped heat, and weighed almost nothing. When you held it in your hand, it felt like you were holding a piece of warm air. But during World War II, the military discovered something far more important. When packed properly between clothing layers, kapok held warmth better than standard-issue blankets. Not just a little bit better, significantly better. Soldiers realized that stuffing their jackets, boots, mittens, and even helmet liners with kapok could keep their body heat locked in for hours. Blankets, especially wool ones, could become heavy, damp, or stiff in freezing weather. Kapok didn't. It stayed warm, stayed light, and didn't soak up moisture the way wool did. A soldier moving through snow mud or river crossings didn't have to worry about carrying around extra water weight. It didn't turn into a cold sponge. That alone made it priceless. The secret was in the fibres. Kapok strands are hollow. Think of tiny tubes filled with air. Each fibre acted like a miniature thermal bottle, trapping heat inside. When thousands of these fibres were packed together, they created a powerful insulating layer. The military didn't have to redesign uniforms to use it. They simply stuffed the material wherever they needed extra warmth. Even naval forces picked it up. Sailors use kapok in life jackets because it refused to sink, even under pressure. But they also noticed another benefit. Those same jackets kept the cold wind off their chest far better than ship blankets did. You could stand on deck at night, icy spray in your face, and the kapok lining would still trap warmth. Meanwhile, on land, kapok turned into a kind of underground survival hack. Troops shared the trick among themselves. If you were lucky enough to find abandoned furniture or damaged supply crates, you ripped out the stuffing, filled your clothing, and made your own improvised winter armour. In places like the Ardennes, where temperatures dropped hard and fast during the Battle of the Bulge, these improvised layers became the difference between a fighting soldier and one immobilized by frostbite. Blankets were useful in camp, sure. But in active combat, blankets slowed you down, snagged on equipment, and were almost useless once wet. Kapok, in contrast, worked while moving, running, hiding, digging, freezing, and fighting. Another reason kapok became so valuable was that it didn't need special tools or tailoring. you could just cram it into any clothing you had on. Even the lining of gloves or socks could be opened and filled. Soldiers learned to create interior pockets inside jackets just for the fibres. You didn't need sewing skills. You didn't need a supply depot. You just needed to find the fibres, shake them out, and pack them in. And even though it was incredibly lightweight, the insulation was powerful. Many veterans recalled how a thin kapok-lined vest felt warmer than wrapping themselves in 2 layers of blankets. That's a bold comparison, but it really speaks to the desperation and creativity of wartime survival. This little-known practice spread across multiple armies, not just one nation. Anywhere the cold became deadly, soldiers instinctively reached for whatever materials held heat, and kapok stood at the top of the list. After the war, kapok didn't disappear because it stopped working. It was replaced by synthetic fibres. Nylon, polyester, foam and chemical insulators were cheaper to mass produce. Manufacturers could control quality better. And governments loved materials that didn't depend on harvesting natural trees. Synthetics took over everything: jackets, sleeping bags, pads, boots. Kapok slowly faded from both military and civilian use. People just forgot how tough and reliable it was during the harshest winters of the war. Ironically, modern outdoor gear often tries to copy the properties kapok already had: water-resistant, lightweight, air-trapping, quick-drying. Sound familiar? Yet the original natural fibre rarely gets credit. And that's exactly why stories like this matter. They remind us that survival sometimes comes down to the simplest materials. Not the flashiest gear, not the most expensive jacket, just knowledge. When you know how to use what's around you, your chances of making it through the cold skyrocket. Kapok makes a comeback every now and then among survivalists and vintage gear fans. It still has the same traits, still repels water, still insulates like crazy, still weighs next to nothing. You can buy small batches of it today, and it can be a great addition to a survival kit or emergency clothing repair. Even stuffing it into a modern jacket can bump up your insulation on a cold night outdoors. Its biggest strength is that it remains functional even when exposed to moisture. The same reason soldiers trusted it in snow, mud and battlefield conditions. For anyone studying survival history or real fieldcraft, kapok is, a reminder that old-school tricks often beat modern assumptions, and sometimes what looks like fluff ends up saving lives. When you look back at World War II, you hear stories of tanks, aircraft, major battles and famous weapons. But the tiny things, the things that kept soldiers alive long enough to fight, rarely make the headlines. Kapok should. It earned its place. And even though most people will never hear about it, the soldiers who survived brutal winters using nothing but courage and a handful of insulating fibres never forgot what it did for them. This is the kind of history that honestly deserves more attention. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's real, it's practical, it's something anyone today can learn from. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more forgotten survival knowledge from World War II, make sure you subscribe to Legacy of Survival and share this video. There's plenty more lost history worth bringing back to life.